what to do, and then Spirit says do. Do 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 do, and that Spirit says do. You got to do when the Spirit says do. You got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you got to do, oh Lord. You got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 You got to sing when that Spirit says sing. Sing when the Spirit says sing. You got to sing when that Spirit says sing. Sing, sing, sing. When the Spirit says sing, you got to sing, oh Lord. You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. 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 Spirit says sing.
You got to groove when the Spirit says groove.
You gotta be grooving, you gotta be
You
grooving.
got to groove when the Spirit says groove.
You have got to groove.
When the Spirit says groove, you've got to groove, oh Lord. You've got to groove
Got to
when the
groove.
Spirit says
groove, says groove.
Spirit says groove. Spirit says groove. Spirit says groove. Spirit says groove. Spirit says groove. Spirit says groove.
You got to rock when the Spirit says rock. You got to rock when the Spirit says rock. When the Spirit says rock, you got to rock, oh Lord. You got to rock when the Spirit says rock. 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 Spirit says rock.
Check it. Yo, I had to call before I walk and now I do the 1-2 step. I heard the Spirit and it said the groove, yeah. That's why I do my own shuffle, tapping feet, clapping hands. If you could talk, you could sing. If you could walk, you could dance. Spirit told me bless the track with the vocals, and I come around your city rocking with the locals. Fading out, got my eyes closed. I think the Lord talking to me, gotta get up all in my zone. Candle gazing after doing Kundalini. I wrote it in my journal, trying to find the true meaning. It ain't gonna happen overnight, I really ain't stressing. I'ma get the blessing. I don't need Google directions, I just follow Spirit. I think I start to hear it. The elders talk about alignment, I just start to get near it. Walk along the path, with or without a clue. When the Spirit says do, I make it do what it do. Come on.
Do when the Spirit says do.
Oh yeah.
You got to do.
Y'all know what it's like when the Spirit says do. I mean, you just gotta do what it do. I know right now, with some Spirit talking to you inside and just telling you to do something. And whatever that is, go with it, alright? The Spirit says do. Spirit says Spirit says do. And you know what? I'ma do what I do. You go ahead and do what you do. And that's how we gonna do what we do. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, baby. Oh yeah.
27 victims, 20 children, 7 adults. And we've heard all day about the incredible response by teachers inside the school, which is considered one of the leading schools in the nation.
That saved a wretch like me. I was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, and now I see.
That's war of words. If we can find that grace, anything is possible. If we can
Many dangers, toil
need to see.
Amazing grace, how
We are ready. Good morning. We ring this bell 3 times. The first time is to call us back into covenant together, to review and rebuild this relationship that we're a part of. We invoke and invite the presence of this land's forebearers, those to whom we did wrong and with whom trust needs repair. We occupy the unceded land of the Muwekma tribe of the Ohlone people. The second bell calls us into relationship with ourselves and one another, that we open to the wisdom and the diverse array of people and practices who are our tribe, that from and with them we learn to invite an ever-widening circle of compassion and commitment until we are all beloved. And the third bell calls us into relationship with our children and with our children's children, out to the 7th generation, helping us to realize that what we do now or what we fail to do will be felt by those who come after us.
Good morning. I was raised Unitarian Universalist, and when we had our 2 daughters, we brought those daughters into the Unitarian Universalist community by having naming ceremonies for each one of them, and we enrolled them in the religious education program. Our older daughter, Aparna, liked the arts and crafts activities, but she never enjoyed the discussions because she wanted answers, and all she got were more questions. Our younger daughter, Nina, had a good group of friends her age in the RE program and enjoyed the social aspects. However, when they were in their early teens, a babysitter introduced them to the local evangelical church with a huge youth group. I'm talking about 100 kids. There was a charismatic leader who taught simple lessons that provided advice about how to improve your life through a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I cringed when my daughters were taught about chastity before marriage and unsuccessfully tried to teach them a broader view about sex. Evolution was another topic where the evangelical church's teachings were in contrast with mine. A part of me felt like my daughters needed to explore their own religious views, and a part of me felt that they should just get over being evangelical and come back to Unitarian Universalism. As our daughters grew to adulthood, I gained some acceptance into the value of their belief in a personal God as a way to cope with uncertainty. I saw how faith in a personal God who was watching out for them helped them relieve anxiety in dealing with challenges of marriage, jobs, childbirth, and other major life-changing events. They have lived through the pandemic with more grace than I could have expected. I have reconciled myself to their choice. Now, when we sit down to eat together, I ask them to pray for all of us. All right, and please join me in reciting these words when they come up. There we go. Reciting these words which call us together as a community with Unitarian Universalists all across the globe. We light this chalice to remind ourselves to treat all people kindly, because we are all one family, to take good care of the earth, because it is our home, to live lives full of goodness and love, because that is how we will become the best people we can be. We'll wait on that one.
Some days are just two flame days, and this might be one of them. All right, welcome to Mission Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation. My name is Deanna Ulm, and I'm a member of the board, and we're so glad that you've joined us this morning. Unitarian Universalism is a radically inclusive, non-doctrinal, non-dogmatic, open-minded, and open-hearted faith. We are people who are all coming at truth from different paths. We gather together across different identities, experiences, and beliefs to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Together, we see our job is to love the hate out of this world, heal the hurt in ourselves and one another, and be the change we'd like to see. We use chat and Zoom or our book by the welcome table to share joys and concerns, personal milestones of importance that will be read aloud during the service. Perhaps you're here for the first time. We've been reaching out and asking people to bring their friends because we think the world, especially now, needs some friendly places to gather and find encouragement and hope. We have social hour after the service where we get to visit with one another in breakout rooms or out on the patio. And for those of you on Zoom, the worship host will give you more information immediately after the service. In the meantime, as soon as I leave the podium, I will put a link to our weekly newsletter in the chat so you can see all of our events coming up, and we encourage you to join anything that speaks to you. I will also put our welcome email, welcome@mpuuc.org, in there, and you can use that to request a newsletter or any other information that you would like. There are a few things we'd like to call your attention to. Attendees should be masked inside and outside of Cole Hall during the service, preferably with N95 or KN95 masks, and we have those masks available at the welcome table, and you can help yourself. Eating and drinking should take place outside. Please silence your electronic devices. Finally, for those of you on Zoom, if you were intending to join the New to UU class this afternoon and you don't have the Zoom link yet, please put a note in the chat and Gail will get that to you right away. If you hear or see something in this morning's service that inspires you or makes you laugh or brings you hope, please tweet it or share it on social media or just tell a friend. We'd like to start a wave of love and justice with every gathering. Thank you so much for joining us.
What is trust? What do we talk about when we talk about trust? Trust is a big word, right? To hear I trust you or I don't trust you, I don't even know what that means. So I wanted to know, what is the anatomy of trust? What does that mean? So I started looking in the research and I found a definition from Charles Feltman that I think is the most beautiful definition I've ever heard. And it's simply this: trust is choosing to make something important to you vulnerable to the actions of someone else. Choosing to make something important to you vulnerable to the actions of someone else. Feltman says that distrust is what I have shared with you that is important to me is not safe with you. So I thought, that's true. And Feltman really calls for this, let's understand what trust is. So we went back into all the data to find out, can I figure out what trust is? Do I know what trust is from the data? And I think I do know what trust is. And I put together an acronym, BRAVING, B-R-A-V-I-N-G, braving, because when we trust, we are braving connection with someone. So what are the parts of trust? B, boundaries. I trust you if you are clear about your boundaries and you hold them and you're clear about my boundaries and you respect them. There is no trust without boundaries. R, reliability. I can only trust you if you do what you say you're going to do, and not once. Reliability, let me tell you what reliability is in research terms. We're always looking for things that are valid and reliable. Any researchers here or research kind of geeks? There's 10 of us. Okay, so we would say a scale that you weigh yourself on is valid if you get on it and it's an accurate weight. 120. Okay. So that would be a very valid scale. I would pay a lot of money for that scale. So that's actually not a valid scale, but we'll pretend for the sake of this. That's a valid scale. A reliable scale is a scale that if I got on it 100 times, it's going to say the same thing every time. So what reliability is you do what you say you're going to do over and over and over again. You cannot gain and earn my trust if you're reliable once, because that's not the definition of reliability. In our working lives, reliability means that we have to be very clear on our limitations so we don't take on so much that we come up short and don't deliver on our commitments. In our personal life, it means the same thing. So when we say to someone, oh God, it was so great seeing you, I'm going to give you a call and we can have lunch. Yes or no? No. It was really great seeing you. Moment of discomfort, goodbye. Right? But honest. So B, boundaries. R, reliability. A, huge, accountability. I can only trust you if, when you make a mistake, you are willing to own it, apologize for it, and make amends. I can only trust you if when I make a mistake, I am allowed to own it, apologize, and make amends. No accountability, no trust. V, and this one shook me to the core. Vault. The vault. What I share with you, you will hold in confidence. What you share with me, I will hold in confidence. But you know what we don't understand? And this came up over and over again in the research. We don't understand the other side of the vault. That's only one door on the vault. Here's where we lose trust with people. If a good friend comes up to me and says, oh my God, did you hear about Caroline? They're getting a divorce and it is ugly. I'm pretty sure her partner's cheating. You have just shared something with me that was not yours to share. And now my trust for you, even though you're gossiping and giving me the juice, now my trust for you is completely diminished. Does that make sense? So the vault is not just about the fact that you hold my confidences. It's that in our relationship, I see that you acknowledge confidentiality. Here's the tricky thing about the vault. A lot of times we share things that are not ours to share as a way to hotwire connection with a friend, right? If you don't have anything nice to say, come sit next to me. You know, that's our, yes or no? Like our closeness is built on talking bad about other people. You know what I call that? Common enemy intimacy. What we have is not real. The intimacy we have is built on hating the same people. And that's counterfeit. That's counterfeit trust. That's not real. So the vault means you respect my story, but you respect other people's story. I, integrity. I cannot trust you and be in a trusting relationship with you if you do not act from a place of integrity and encourage me to do the same. So what is integrity? So I came up with this definition because I didn't like any of the ones out there, and that's what I do when I don't like them. I do. I look in the data and I say, what's integrity? Here's what I think integrity is. 3 pieces. It's choosing courage over comfort, choosing what's right over what's fun, fast, or easy, and practicing your values, not just professing your values. Right? I mean, that's integrity. In non-judgment, I can fall apart, ask for help, and be in struggle without being judged by you. And you can fall apart and be in struggle and ask for help without being judged by me. Which is really hard because we're better at helping than we are asking for help. And we think that we've set up trusting relationships with people who really trust us because we're always there to help them. But let me tell you this, if you can't ask for help and they cannot reciprocate that, that is not a trusting relationship, period. And when we assign value to needing help, when I think less of myself for needing help, whether you're conscious of it or not, when you offer help to someone, you think less of them too. You cannot judge yourself for needing help, but not judge others for needing your help. And somewhere in there, if you're like me, you're getting value from being the helper in a relationship. You think that's your worth. But real trust doesn't exist unless help is reciprocal and non-judgment. The last one is G, generosity. Our relationship is only a trusting relationship if you can assume the most generous thing about my words, intentions, and behaviors, and then check in with me. So if I screw up, say something, forget something, you will make a generous assumption and say, yesterday was my mom's 1-year anniversary of her death, and it was really tough for me, and I talked to you about it last month. And I really was hoping that you would have called. But I know you care about me. I know you think it's a big deal. So I wanted to let you know that I've been thinking about that. As opposed to not returning calls, not returning emails, and waiting for the moment where you can spring, well, you forgot to call on this important, you'll make a generous assumption about me and check it out. Does that make sense? So we've got boundaries, reliability, accountability, the vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. This is the anatomy of trust.
And this is a perfect segue into our practice of generosity. We take up a collection on Sundays for the simple reason that our purpose in gathering is for more than ourselves. We want to make sure that the ministries that we need, the ones that infuse worth and dignity into our children, our youth, our programs of learning and leadership, and our ministries of anti-oppression and our work in the larger world are in place to meet the needs of others. We hope you will make a contribution toward these worthy causes by mailing your check to Mission Peak UU congregation at the address on the screen. You can also use the bill pay option in your online banking, or drop your check into the Mission Peak mail slot, or pay online with a credit or debit card. Thank you for supporting and sustaining the efforts of our members, friends, and staff. Your contributions make loving, learning, and leadership more possible.
One of the things that allows us to find hope and meaning, especially in the hard times, is showing up for one another. Showing up physically, but also emotionally, mentally, spiritually, or virtually. If you have a joy or concern that by sharing with us might bring encouragement or resilience, then we invite you, if you are joining us in our online community, to write it briefly in the chat, remembering to put your name, whether it's a joy or concern, and then briefly what you would like to have us hold for you. Or if you're here in person, you could sign something in the book. If you would like to join us by placing a stone silently in our stone garden, then you are welcome to do that as the music plays. If your need is a little bit more personal, I invite you to send me or Reverend Barbara an email, and we will have a follow-up conversation. These are the joys and concerns that are alive in our hearts today. First, a great appreciation, thanks, and love to Joanne Schreiner, who was playing our piano. An appreciation for Brene Brown and that video, which there's a link in the chat if you'd like to get that, but you could look online and get all kinds of fantastic Brene Brown stuff. Brene Brown is very generous with her material. So let us now open our hearts and open our minds for a prayer. We all gather here in a holy time. These are the final few days leading up to the days of awe in the Jewish calendar. These are the days that were made for reflection and reconciliation. We call ourselves into this tradition to recognize and mourn whatever divisions or estrangements we might feel, that we might open our hearts, reach out, make amends, and seek atonement or at-one-ment. Seeking reparation is hard unless we first know that we are loved and that we are worthy. So for those of you with us this morning and for all in your extended reach of care, please know you matter. You are loved. You are worthy. And you being part of this great, big, wild, wonderful world is why you were born, and we're glad you're here. And finally, one last stone for all the hopes and hurts still too tender to escape our hearts. May, for the sake of love, we keep our doors, our hearts, our minds, and our arms open. Please join with me in the spirit of this reflection. The reflection this morning comes from an article in the Holy Herald, a periodical for the light-hearted Lutheran, in case you didn't know there was such a thing. In Huron, South Dakota this past Sunday, hundreds were hospitalized and scores more traumatized for life in the wake of a disastrous hymn rollout at St. Timothy's Lutheran Church. Recklessly acting in a way contrary to all Lutheran sensibilities, Pastor Norman Schroeder inserted a previously unsung hymn, "Through the Blood We Come," into the church service. I remember paging to hymn 372 and thinking it looked unfamiliar, said helpless victim Dolores Hamilton from her hospital bed. My heart started pounding in my chest, my vision narrowed. As we started singing, my hands trembled uncontrollably. I felt lightheaded. I don't even think I made it through the first stanza before I passed out. First responders were overwhelmed by the chaos that extended all the way back to the vestibule. Ambulances struggled to make their way through the terrified mob streaming through the church parking lot. Inside the sanctuary, hundreds were incapacitated, many still frozen with their hands clutched over their ears in a vain attempt to shut out the unfamiliar tune. The few who were able to remain conscious were in such a weakened state they were unable to assist their more gravely injured Lutherans. We haven't seen such a tragedy since the Reformed Church tried to introduce a contemporary version of "Nearer My God to Thee," lamented local police chief Richard Johnson. Thank goodness there was no loss of life. If we hadn't tasered the organist, the death toll could have truly been catastrophic. The investigation is only beginning, but already red lights are flashing in the eyes of all common sense Lutherans. Why didn't Pastor Schroeder run his plans past the worship committee? Why wasn't the hymn introduced as a prelude or an offertory? Why weren't congregants warned the standard 3 months in advance that a new hymn was being introduced? Only a fair, impartial investigation and the immediate excommunication and hanging of Pastor Schroeder can ensure such a tragedy never occurs again.
It's the hardest thing to give away and last thing on your mind today. It always goes to those who don't deserve. It's the opposite of how you feel when the pain they caused is just too real. Takes everything you have to say the word forgiveness. 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 It flies in the face of all your pride. It moves away the mad inside. It's always anger's own worst enemy. And even when the jury and the judge say you've got a right to hold a grudge, it's the whisper in your ear saying, set it free. Forgiveness. Forgiveness. Show me how to love the unlovable. Show me how to reach the unreachable. Help me now to do the impossible. Forgiveness. Help me now to do the impossible. Forgiveness. Forgiveness. It'll clear the bitterness away. It can even set a prisoner free. There is no end to what its power can do. So let it go and be amazed by what you see through eyes of grace. The prisoner that it really frees is you. Forgiveness. Oh, forgiveness. 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 Show me how to love the unlovable. Show me how to reach the unreachable. Help me now to do the impossible. Forgiveness, I want to finally set it free. Show me how to see what your mercy sees. Help me now to give what you gave to me. Forgiveness. 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 Oh, forgiveness. 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 Forgiveness.
Thank you to Nudie, who arranged and sang that with Joanne. Poor Pastor Schroeder. You have to think that he meant well when he introduced that unfamiliar hymn, the one that sounded like a cross between a chainsaw mating with a feral cat in heat. And on hindsight, everyone in the church could really agree that the hypnotic wailing, ingeniously molded into a relentless 4/4 time with a slightly minor key, was really an ingenious way to depict the gates of hell. Yeah, he meant well. Many in his congregation admitted that as they, one by one, filed past his grave, some spitting and others just glaring, where everyone got to stick a pin in the voodoo likeness of Pastor Schroeder that was created by the women's auxiliary team. It's probably not even his fault, they conceded. He probably went to one of those new fandangled seminaries that praise innovation and don't require you to read music. Yes, poor Pastor Schroeder. But you know who I really feel sorry for? The guy who comes after Pastor Schroeder. The next pastor, or in church parlance, the after pastor. The after pastor is the guy who comes in when they finish burying the remaining members of the music committee who died in the massacre, and when the debris has been cleared and the scorch marks have been taken away from the bomb crater, cleaned up, and the pulpit put back in place. The after pastor comes in with naive optimism, thinking nothing happened. After all, there was no notation on the history page of the church website. No one talked about it on the search team. It was considered bad form. Still, there was all the sideways glances directed at the chancel every time the music for the service was announced, and hundreds of eyes he felt over his shoulder whenever the hymns were being selected. There must be something to that. I will tell you at the outset, this is a sermon that points toward hope. But it's a hard one because to get to that hope, we need to explore the repair of broken trust. Our commitment to keep ourselves and each other pointed toward hope is why we all came together in the first place. It's why we created the covenant, and trust is a big part of that. As we mentioned a few weeks ago, the first aspiration of our covenant is that we aspire to the highest levels of trust. To be trustworthy, we will show up, do what we say we will do, and communicate with kindness. To practice trust, we will focus on the best within people. I warn you, though, it's hard to work with broken trust. Don't be surprised if you occasionally have to step over pieces of ivory or wood splinters or charred pipes that were once our beloved organ. Trust unrepaired is full of traumatic images. Real trust never arrives bright and shiny new from the manufacturer. Remember the words of Kipling. You must bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, and which the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop to build them up with worn-out tools. To make the point this morning, I want to tell you an ancient true story that I just made up. Adam and Eve were married. And I say were in the tenuous past-present sense that sits uneasily in our hearts. They were stuck, wanting to find their way back into their marriage or forward, but not knowing the way. Sometime back, Eve had an affair, and Adam was devastated. The affair was a mistake, and Eve knew it immediately. It didn't end with her being caught. She ended it and confessed the whole thing. She felt terrible and apologized for the pain that she could see in Adam. She clearly felt regret and remorse, and she attentively allowed time and space for the trust to return. But it didn't. Adam's tears and sullenness didn't stop. The disease, the doubt, the depression all swept in and lingered. They both recognized that the event was a turning point in their lives, a point where the old relationship was at an end and where a new one could begin if they could figure out how. They went to counseling, which, after a short time, made it even more clear how deep the pain ran and how Adam was mired in it. They had been very close and happy. And it wasn't that Adam didn't want all that back. It was just that he didn't know how to get there. Gaining and losing trust is a prominent theme in every human story. It is as old as Adam and Eve, and it is by no means exclusively applied to issues of romantic fidelity. Marriage and family counselor Terry Real calls peekaboo the oldest known trust exercise. It is an intellectual teaching from almost every adult who ever holds an infant. And in essence, the game is really a confession saying, remember this, kid, you're going to need it. It prepares our youngest to go from connection to disconnection to repair. Psychologists have found that the human brain is conditioned to check for safety at least once every 4 seconds. And because occasionally those checks don't turn out perfectly, repair is a regular and essential part of relationship maintenance. But more and more people are doing less and less repair. For some, it's just too much work, and others simply find that they've discovered they're not very good at it. Some just try and adopt the fantasy that what's true never breaks. Such people are often seduced into relationships that feel safe, like with their phones, for solace and connection. But such connection is low potency, more algorithm than loving connection. Without repair and accountability, we're losing trust in our politicians and in our corporate leaders, and even in institutions like religion and education and our economy. In fact, the economy is a good example. Money, which is mostly paper, has itself no intrinsic value. It is only representational value based on widespread agreements that we all share. It's a system based entirely on trust. To reinforce that notion, in this country, we print "In God We Trust" on each piece of currency. But any recession or bear market is simply the system's broken trust regarding some malfeasance of the players. And God must be linked to malfeasance, or why would she have put temptation at the very center of the garden? But it's more than money. Broken trust is something felt by a great many, although most can't explain why or how. But recently we begin to be able to say how much. Edelman International Communications, which reports on levels of trust in 83 countries, just released their 2022 report. It cites that less than half of all Americans trust our government to do what is right. That is down to 42%, 2 points less than last year and 20 points less than it was 6 years ago. We also know that more citizens in this country are convinced that we are being lied to by the media, by our government leaders, and by business leaders. And all of those suspicions of being lied to are up from last year. In fact, distrust is now the default attitude of most people. When asked, 59% of the population in this country reported their default stance is to distrust something until proven otherwise. And 64% of the population believe that people lack the fundamental ability to have constructive conversations on topics about which they disagree. This perhaps explains why so many people feel our democracy is eroding. Only 43% of the people in this country trust our current democratic system the way that it is operating. This is down 10 points since 2017. Internationally, our trust in our democracy in this country ranks only slightly above Russians' trust of their democracy. It seems like things such as doubt and cynicism and wariness are on the rise, and trust is on the run, which is concerning, especially when you read the preface to the Edelman Institute's premise. They say, trust is the ultimate currency in relationship that all institutions, companies, brands, governments, NGOs, and the media build with their stakeholders. Trust defines an organization's moral license to operate, to lead, and succeed. Trust is the foundation that allows an organization to take responsible risk and, if it makes mistakes, to rebound from them. It is the key to any organization which wishes to remain relevant to its stakeholders. Trust is the key to people's sense of safety and security, generosity, confidence, cooperation, and the impulse to be kind. Trust is correlated with increased civic participation, cooperation, and resilience in the wake of disasters. It is also a primary factor correlated with increased health and happiness and intelligence. And the restoration of collective trust is a key reason behind people taking a stance against inequality or illegal activities or corruption. Practically every researcher studying trust has concluded that it is one of the highest determinants of individual and community success and well-being. In the course of therapy, it became apparent that Adam's struggle wasn't in trusting Eve. It was in trusting anyone and anything. As they brought the full arc of their lives into the room with them, they discovered that Adam's struggle to regain trust didn't begin at Eve's affair, but much earlier. He shared memories of being a child and stories of his time as a baby where his parents were often preoccupied with other things. They were unavailable or inconsistent in anticipating and responding to his needs for affection or attention, play, or safety. He remembered being bullied at school and having teachers and peers fail to step in to support him. In just a few sessions, Adam was able to recall trust being broken 1,000,000 times before he even started dating Eve. And his response to these disappointments was usually to try and forget them as fast as he could, which of course he couldn't, primarily because recalling those lessons were trying to teach him something. In his avoidance, he never got around to processing the fears or insecurities that came from his hurt, and he wound up learning more about building cynicism and fortifying protective armor around him than rebuilding trust. And the real tragedy, over time, those fears and insecurities created a barrier between himself and his own self-worth. As a young adult, he had relationships, but none went very deep. And when he met Eve, he allowed himself to believe that she was different. She was the exception. She could be that bridge to his self-worth that he was missing, and he could finally get all of his previous disappointments healed. Eve's affair brought up such a backlog of unprocessed hurt, it felt to Adam that he was facing a psychic tsunami too overwhelming to re-enter the relationship. And at first he thought it was just the affair and the betrayal that made reconciliation so hard, but therapy revealed how all the old hurts stored in his muscle memory got released when triggered by the latest disappointment. Eve was the after-pastor to Adam's relationship pain. What's more, they discovered that part of what preceded Eve's affair was her confusion around feeling trapped in the relationship. She had lots of friends, but Adam didn't. She seemed to be his only source of real connection, and when she extended herself out into the world, she could feel his discomfort. A lack of trust came across in ways that would grate on her and make her feel like she was being held captive in a container too small. As I said earlier, the way to wholehearted living includes a central threshold that needs crossing, that is about maintenance and repair of trust. In the words of professor and therapist and author David Richo, some of us employ trust easily and appropriately because we've had safe and secure past. Many of us, however, have had somewhat of a checkered experience of trust dating back to before we could even remember. Our parents were mostly trustworthy, but sometimes they failed us. A few of us were even so betrayed and abused that we lost our ability to calibrate and apply trust appropriately and reliably. If such is the case for us, our adult relationships might seem like one painful episode of The Bachelorette, one after the other, where betrayals abound and we find ourselves continuously on the front lines protecting our sense of hope and resilience. But protection and defensiveness don't tend to attract new trust. So here's the kicker. It's not just about trusting others. One of the biggest indicators for successful rebuilding of trust is learning to trust ourselves to survive disappointment. It's what keeps us from making excessive demands on others to be trustworthy, when the real need is for us to cultivate, maintain, and repair the trust of our own well-being. So what can we do? Shame researcher Brené Brown tells the story about what she does when trust turns up missing. And she got this from a story her daughter shared. One day, Ellen came home from third grade crying. Ellen had shared something tender with a friend in her class that she didn't want anyone else to know, and by the time the class returned from recess, everyone was laughing and pointing at her. They knew, and she was mortified. "I am never going to trust anyone again," Ellen said. If this has ever been your response to trust being broken, don't feel bad, because that was Brené Brown's initial response as a mother as well. In her head, she was thinking, damn straight. The next thing that she needed to do is to find out exactly who every one of those children were, and then get an apartment next door to the school so she could sit on the porch with a shotgun over her lap like Granny Clampett. She stopped that thinking. "And then what happened?" she asked Ellen. "Well, then Mrs. Markham took marbles out of the marble jar." Brené looked confused, so Ellen explained. "Well, every time the class makes a good decision, Miss Markham will put a marble in the marble jar. When we make a decision that hurts someone, she will take marbles out of the marble jar. The recess debacle resulted in lots of marbles being removed from the jar. This story sent Brené Brown to study the data, and what she found in thousands of interviews was remarkably consistent. Trust is like a marble jar, she says. You share the hard stuff with the people who, along with you, put marbles in the jar. Marbles go in our collective jar for little things. When a friend sends a card, when our boss asks about our mom's chemo, when someone checks in with us or our family on the anniversary of a loss. And do you know what stood out from the data as the number one reason why people put marbles in the marble jar? Showing up at funerals. To be trustworthy, our covenant says, we will show up, do what we say we will do, and communicate with kindness. To practice trust, we will focus on the best within people. Eve showed up and kept showing up, even though it felt sometimes like the funeral for their relationship before the affair would go on forever. She showed up not out of guilt or obligation, but out of love, and out of a certainty that the life she wanted was with Adam, and that it was possible. And part of the possibility she envisioned depended on her learning to forgive and trust herself enough to be resilient in the moments she didn't get the trust she felt she deserved. And part of it depended on Adam forgiving and trusting himself to extend trust to others. Trust is like love. It begins with ourselves. If we can't love or trust ourselves, we wind up looking pretty awkward and uncomfortable trying to love and trust others. Or as the African proverb says, beware the naked man who offers you a shirt. Brené Brown developed the anatomy of trust for her book, Braving the Wilderness. In it, she references her previous book, Rising Strong, and the many people who perversely try to sow distrust to leverage an advantage. Think Trump. She describes the antidote to those people who wield that distrust as a weapon. She writes, there is no greater threat to critics and cynics and fearmongers than those of us who are willing to fall because we have learned to rise. With skinned knees and bruised hearts, we choose owning our stories of struggle over hiding, over hustling, over pretending. When we deny our stories, they define us. When we run from struggle, we are never free. So we turn toward truth and look it in the eye. We will not be characters in our stories, not the villains, not the victims, not even the heroes. We are the authors of our lives. We write our own daring endings. We craft love from heartbreak, compassion from shame, grace from disappointment, courage from failure, and showing up is our superpower. Story is our way home. Truth is our song. We are brave and brokenhearted. We are rising strong. Poor Pastor Schroeder. He and St. Timothy's were done in by believing that mistakes are the end, and that pain and disillusionment are evidence of not mattering. But it is from listening carefully and writing different endings to his and our own stories that we learn that our pain is not why we avoid church or bad hymns or the people who sing them. Indeed, we come to communities like this to learn that new song that we never knew, the one our hearts sing to us about resilience. It is here that we craft love from heartbreak, compassion from shame, courage from failure, and it is here that we make showing up our superpower to the glory of life.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole. Oh, may we be whole.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled filled with loving kindness. May we be well, may we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
Please join me in reciting these words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Friends, with one hand on your hearts, reach out and complete this promise with yourself, your tribe, and the world around us. For it is here that we come, to communities like this, to learn that new song that has eluded us, the one our heart sings to us about resilience. It is here we craft love from heartbreak, compassion from shame, courage from failure. And it is here that we learn to make showing up our superpower. May that be our prayer and our promise. Amen. Oh. And there are donuts.